All right, it's high noon. We're going to go ahead and get kicked off here. Good afternoon, Big Sky. My name is Danny Bierschwal. I'm the executive director with the Big Sky Resort Area District, and we're so proud to be working with this wonderful community to host a suite of events here that we are now in our second day of. Yesterday, we heard from our community leaders, many community leaders regarding the implementation of our Big Sky plan. And in the evening, we heard from our officials who are candidates moving forward for the November election. Both of those sessions are now available online. So if you missed them, go back and catch them in the virtual realm. We're really excited about this discussion today, and our topic today is water supply. So focused on the big ideas and concepts that are critical to the success of our community. And we look forward to this discussion today, and it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. He's a neighbor, friend, and member of the Big Sky family right here with us, Joe O'Connor. Joe has done a few of these moderated discussions as we were in the midst of a pandemic here in Big Sky, and there was a need for helping to get the word out regarding what Big Sky and the community at large is working on regarding the pandemic. And I cannot think of a better moderator than our neighbor, Joe O'Connor here. So without further ado, Joe, thanks for joining us and moderating this discussion.
Thank you very much, Danny.
Congratulations on your new role as managing editor with Mountain Outlaw. I'm sure you will be as successful with them as you were here in our community with Outlaw Partners. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Danny. Welcome, everyone, and happy lunchtime. I don't know. What do you say at noon? I guess good day could work. But anyway, thank you for joining us for this Community Week panel discussion on water supply. And thank you again, Danny, for the introduction. Again, I'm Joe O'Connor, managing editor for Mountain Journal, a nonprofit public interest conservation journalism site dedicated to saving the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Our stories are free online at mountainjournal.org. Little plug there. As Danny mentioned, I've lived in Big Sky most of the last 10 years, and as a journalist, have been covering issues like water supply and many others here over that time. Water in the American West might be the most important issue we face. It's connected to nearly every other component of life in this area of the country: wildfire, drought, population density, housing development, wildlife, recreation. In Southwest Montana, and in Big Sky in particular, it dominates local headlines and has been the source, so to speak, of concern and debate. But it is our life source. The mighty Gallatin River runs right over there and is a constant reminder of the beauty of this area. And it also reminds us of what we must protect, preserve, and respect. We have a great panel with us today. I'd love to introduce them now. Kristin Gardner is the Chief Executive and Science Officer for the Gallatin River Task Force. Full disclosure, my wife Emily is the organization's Conservation Director. Jim Muscat is Water Superintendent for the Gallatin Canyon Water and Sewer District. And Scott Altman, who is with us, is not?
Not yet.
Not yet. We're hoping Scott will join us. He's the board chair. Rich Chandler serves as Director of Environmental Operations for Lone Mountain Land Company. Mace Mangold is Senior Project Engineer with WGM Group. That's a Montana planning and design firm that's helped to solidify the Gallatin Canyon Water and Sewer District as a public utility and advance a key Big Sky community goal of improving and protecting the Gallatin River. And last but not least, James Rose is a hydrologist for the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology. Quickly, want to just put this out there. We only have an hour, so I'd like to remind our panelists to please keep your responses to 5 minutes or less. We'll have a short amount of time at the end of our discussion for audience questions as well. You can submit these questions via Facebook or Zoom. And finally, a recording of this discussion will be available tomorrow morning on bigskycommunityweek.com. All right, let's get it going. James Rose, I'd like to start with you. If you wouldn't mind, it'd be great to get an overview of Big Sky's water supply and the current situation here in the area.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for the invite, Joe, and thanks for the panel. And good afternoon. I'm going to put up a presentation I have, give you the 5-minute overview of, or 10-minute overview, I guess, of what we've been working on at Big Sky. And we have this extensive report was just published this fall and is now available for everybody. But I want to give you a little summary of kind of what we found with the investigation of Big Sky's water supply situation. I work for the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology groundwater investigation program, and our job is to work with local communities with water supply issues, whether it's water quality or water availability. And we try and do the geologic and hydrogeologic background and research to figure out, answer some some questions about what's going on, what's the nature of the water systems that are available to the community, and help them with some general information, some interpretation of what's going on with the geology and hydrogeology of the area, so that they can make decisions for their future planning and design. And that's exactly what we did at Big Sky. The question at Big Sky was there's concern in the future that water supply is going to be stressed and going to be inadequate for supplying water to the growing community. And so we tried to identify all the water supply systems available and looked into any possible alternative water sources as well. I'd like to point out too that all water supplies that come that are supplied in Big Sky all come from groundwater. There's no surface water use, and that's a permitting issue more than anything. But everything at Big Sky comes from groundwater, so it's vitally important to understand what the groundwater system's like. So for this project, we took our groundwater information center database we have here, and we looked at all the wells available in use at Big Sky and tried to identify all the different aquifer systems that are in use within the study area, within the Big Sky community. And we wanted to monitor each of those aquifers and figure out what the nature of them is, what the water availability might be from those, what the water chemistry is like, is the water quality good, those sort of things. And from that, we selected 94 wells that we monitored for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, to look at water level changes, look at the water chemistry. We also drilled 15 wells in the Meadow Village aquifer, which is right here, down here below the golf course at Meadow Village, and tried to better define that sand and gravel aquifer. That's a very big part of water supplies at Big Sky. From our investigation work, we found that there were 7 aquifers that are in use at Big Sky from various wells. And 2 of the major ones are sand and gravel beneath the Mountain Village area and sand and gravel beneath the Meadow Village golf course area. And those are big suppliers and the best producers for the Big Sky area. But outside of those areas, any well supply has to rely on bedrock water sources. And those bedrock sources come from 5 different aquifers, and you can see the blue marks are roughly where those are. It's pretty variable depending on where you are in the Big Sky area, but essentially these are sandstones, thin sandstones, maybe 3 to 10 feet thick, within a thick shale package. Most of the rock is shale, which is very poor conductor of water. Very little water moves through it, so you have to rely on these small sandstone ledge formations to supply you the water. And you can see of all the bedrock available in about 2,400 feet of geologic section below Big Sky, less than 20% is probably sandstones that can contain water, and not all those sandstones do have water in them. So you can see that you've already put quite a limit on where your water supply might come from. Just to give you an example, this black rock here, this is up at Ouzel Falls area. This black rock is a shale. None of this.
Hey, James, sorry to interrupt. I think your slides aren't moving with your.
Oh, okay. Do you have one of Ouzel Falls here? Just a shale outcrop?
I think we're looking at your kind of opening page.
Cover.
Oh, really? Okay. Let me try it again here. Try to share again. Oh, it's paused. Let's see what's going on here. Resume share. Okay.
There we go.
So there's the wells,
Okay.
the 94 wells. And then here was the section, the geologic cross section, and showing the blue shows the different aquifers in the bedrock and the two sand and gravel ones up above. And then this is Ouzel Falls. Can you see that? The shale outcrop. Okay. So the shale formation doesn't carry or transmit water well at all. And so there's no water in this thick section of shale, which is predominantly what's at Big Sky. There's some shale with sands down here below in this rougher section, looking section here. But down at the bottom, you can see this one thick sandstone, maybe 3 to 4 feet thick. And that's the water supply for a lot of the area at Big Sky. It'll vary in thickness up to 10 feet or so. And it's fractured sandstone. The sandstone can carry water in the pore space, but also through the fractures. And that's where most of the drilling goes into these sort of, there's 5 at least or more of these little sandstone lenses that supply water to wells. So taking those that bedrock into consideration, all that shale and sandstone was laid down flat at one time, but through geologic mapping by other geologists with the U.S. Geologic Survey and Montana Bureau of Mines Geology, they put together a picture of what's gone on here, and it's pretty dramatic. The Spanish Peaks Fault initially compressed this rock with faulting from the north, which compressed all the rock north to south and folded and faulted all the shales and sandstones within the Big Sky area. Following that, with some faulting from the west to the east, which did the same thing, compressed and folded the rock. Andesite Mountain is a good example of a big fold where the bedrock's been lifted up and folded into an arch, and that forms the Andesite Mountain ridge that you see. Following that, molten magma was intruded into the Lone Mountain, Pioneer Mountain, Fan Mountain, Cedar Mountain areas, which pushed up and tilted a lot of the bedrock in the area, and it all slopes and tilts away from these mountains, and that adds an additional complexity to the geology in the area. And these red lines here show different folds, and these are just the major folds and structures. There's many hundreds more that are probably within this bedrock, but it's very difficult to see with the glacial ground cover and sediments and landslide slumps and those sort of things that kind of cover and obscure some of the geology. So these are the major structures, but again, there's many, many more similar to that aren't mapped. So if you take a look from north to south, you can see that this structure on the right side pushed the bedrock up. That's north of, in the Gallatin Canyon, that's north of Big Sky, and formed that north ridge. The Spanish Peaks Fault is actually the north ridge that you see looking from Big Sky up onto the mountain front there. You can see the rock was twisted and folded, and this is a really generalized picture, but gives you the idea of kind of what went on with the compressional forces. All the red over here is the Lone Mountain intrusion, and this is all intruded magmatic rock that flowed in between all the layers of the bedrock, and again, further complicated and distorted some of the bedrock. If you look from east to west, here's Meadow Village on the right side and Moonlight Basin on the left. I kind of did a generalized view of some of the wells that we did monitor and look at with the geology. And I took one of the geologic formations that we identify, and that's this gray layer that you see going through here. And you can see how this layer is tilted at Meadow Village, slopes up towards Lone Mountain. But then with the folds of Andesite Mountain and other folds in the area, you can see how this becomes kind of curved and distorted and crunched and compressed. And then there's a big separation, and then the formation is dipping to the west when you get over by Moonlight Basin area. And even there, you have these landslide type blocks that have slumped off the mountainside and have rotated and twisted these blocks. So now you can see there's a formation laying a little flatter there and even dipping back to the east again over here. So these have all been broken into segments and chunks. And what makes that a difficult problem is that if you look at a typical fault plane situation, And let's just say this brick red color here is the aquifer you want to get water from. If you come over here into this block and you drill a well into that formation, you're only going to get water over to the fault. The faulting has moved and separated this aquifer from the other part of the system. And so now you've got this small block that you can draw water from. And that gives a well kind of a limited resource to draw from and makes it more difficult to get high volumes of water from the aquifer. And you can imagine if there was a fault on this side of the block, on all sides of this block, you've really limited where that well can draw water from by looking at just this small space. And you'd have to drill another well over here to get into the other part of the aquifer and to draw water from there. And that's the biggest problem at Big Sky right now. And if you're talking about these thin sandstone lenses, that adds to the complication as well. And you can see this all over the place. You can see along the road up to the base area, you can see these shales and sandstones are slightly dipping off to the east. Other areas, they're standing almost vertically on edge. They're dipping very steeply, so they've been faulted and displaced. And then the other reason that we suspect these aquifers are broken up into segments and pieces is in this example of here's 3 wells drilled at Moonlight Basin. These were existing, and these are not pumped wells. These are just, these were exploration or monitoring wells. And these are all drilled into the same sandstone formation, but you can see that each of them responds and reacts differently each year. This one only changes from, let's see, 10, 25 feet or 25 to 30 feet per year. This one's over 60 feet a year in water level change with recharge from snowmelt coming in, and the water level rises, and then water will drain off through the year. And then this one down here at the bottom of the hill by the golf course, there's only less than 2 feet of change, or maybe 2.5 feet of change throughout the seasonal. You see the seasonal signal each year, but the changes are very different from one another. And if these were all interconnected in the same aquifer, they would all expect to respond the same. So you have quite a difference in water level changes there, which makes us suspect that these are broken up and segmented pieces. So the other thing we learned from groundwater levels is in monitoring through the year. When I look at this well from Meadow Village Aquifer, and this is an interesting one. There's the gray area here is the snow water accumulation. So essentially snow accumulation through the year. And then it reaches a peak here around March, April. And then as the snow melts, the water content of the snow obviously decreases down to 0 by middle of June in this case. And what you can see here is as the snow reaches its peak accumulation and then begins to melt, you can see the water level in the ground starts to rise. And you see this all over Big Sky in the bedrock wells, and then in this case, in the sand and gravel of the Meadow Village Aquifer, you see the water levels rising as the snow is melting. So that means the snow is melting and infiltrating into the ground through cracks and fractures, or soaking into the sands and gravels of, say, the Meadow Village Aquifer. And then once the snow stops, though, the interesting thing, once the snow stops melting, all of a sudden there's no more recharge to the system. So through the summer, you get natural declines in the water level as the water level slowly drains out of the system, and there's no further recharge. There's also little, in this case, this little dip here is an indication of water pumping activity from the aquifer from other wells, and it shows the little bit of drawdown impact. But then you can see through the winter and into the next spring, before snowmelt starts, the water level just continues to slowly decline as the water seeps out of the ground and actually feeds the rivers and streams in the area. And that's what maintains the stream flows through the winter, is this groundwater seeping out into the system, into the river system. So the other thing that's interesting over here is this well was drilled next to a large pumping well for the Meadow Village Aquifer water supply system. And during 2013-14, this well was not, this pumping well adjacent to this well was not used. But in 2015, you can see that the adjacent well was pumped. And that's what these marks are here, is each time that pump cycled, it drew the aquifer water level down to a lower level, and then we would recover. But you can see through regular use of that, the water level drew down significantly and dropped lower than most of the other time previous to that. But on the other hand, you can see that the aquifer did rebound once that pumping stopped. The water level did rebound back to its more natural level and continued on its natural decline here. So it shows that the aquifer is resilient and did recover back to a more natural level after the pumping ceased. And you see that again in bedrock and in the sand and gravel aquifers. You get the snowmelt recharging aquifers. You get pumping influence from summer season and from winter season. And then you get this recovery rebound where the water level recovers back to its natural level. So that's an indication that the pumping is not seriously impacting the aquifer. That stress is short term and the aquifer is resilient enough to recover from that pumping impact. And so it means that right now there's no detrimental effect to long-term losses from that aquifer. The aquifer is able to recover itself after pumping events. Just another example, you can see again the snow melt, the snow accumulation and the snow melt here in the gray. And you can see this well was probably heavily pumped over here on the left side. And then it slowly recovers. During the summer months, you can see pumping influence from nearby wells. And then here in the fall, we suspect this was probably from some pumping from a number of wells in the area that drew down the water level very, very deeply. And then, but then once again, once that pumping stopped, it recovered back to a natural level and continued on. So again, even with high stresses, there was not a lot of problem with water level recovery. And just to show you here, the stream levels kind of follow mimic the same patterns as the groundwater levels do. First, because they're getting snow melt, but also because of the drainage and runoff from the groundwater system. The other thing we looked at was groundwater vulnerability to contamination. And one thing we looked at was nitrate concentrations. And the drinking water standard is 10 milligrams per liter nitrate in water. And we saw none of that, no exceedances anywhere in any sort of chemistry. The chemistry of the water, Big Sky overall is very good. One thing we did notice was that there's an elevated concentration of nitrates in the Meadow Village aquifer, sand and gravel here. But you can see the other areas are all less than 2 milligrams per liter. And so these were up to 7 was the highest we saw. There are also a couple springs that drain from the Meadow Village aquifer and they drain into the Middle Fork and the South Fork rivers. And again, they had elevated concentrations of nitrate in them as well. So what's all this mean? The aquifers from drawing, most of the Big Sky is drawing from thin sandstones that are broken and segmented. But the groundwater recharge is seasonal and it's strictly from snowmelt. And snowmelt's a great benefit to the aquifers because they recharge each year back to a level of previous years. Right now, pumping, there was no indication of pumping harming the aquifer longevity or usefulness. So right now, the aquifers are able to maintain and supply the water needs of the community. Groundwater supports surface water flow during the winter months, and they're all groundwater and surface water are all interconnected. So what happens to one may affect the other one. Again, groundwater is vulnerable to contamination, as is surface water, and what happens to one can possibly happen to both. So that pretty much sums up kind of my short version of what we learned. And also want to mention that coming soon will be a pamphlet with a brief description of some of this too, to summarize for general public's use. And Gallatin River Task Force and the Bureau are working on getting that out this fall and still. So that will be available to the general public for distribution around the area. Hopefully it's helpful.
James Rose, thank you very much. That was a great overview, and I think it gives us some background into the rest of our conversation. Jim Muscat, let's put that in context a bit. It's been reported in local media that the Big Sky County Water and Sewer District officials believe Big Sky's water demand will outpace supply in Meadow Village by 2032. I'd like to ask you, what does this mean for the district, and will the new water resource recovery facility that's under construction have any impact on water supply?
Thanks, Joe, and thanks, James, for a great overview of that. And I think before I get into too much, I think it's really some things for everybody to understand is, what the question is, how is this affecting the Big Sky Water and Sewer District? Well, it's important to know there are multiple public water systems within Big Sky. Now, if this was the town of Bozeman, it'd be, how does Bozeman's water? But we are, as everybody knows, a little different up here in that we're multiple districts. So my responses are, how does this affect our particular district? And the YC, the Spanish Peaks, Moonlight, all those water systems are faced with the same challenges and trying to live within their means with their water supply too. And that's really where I'm going with this. And but it's important to realize there are multiple water systems up here. What we're doing, what we've always done is, when Big Sky started, you had original mountain and meadow village, and that was all that was supposed to be there. There was well drilled to satisfy that ultimate demand. Well, we've obviously grown a lot more. Town Center, West Fork, South Fork, all these other communities. So the demand that Big Sky, that everything falls under that heading, and in this case, Big Sky Water and Sewer, is kind of a moving carrot at the end of the stick. So final build out is moved in front of us. But what we do to stay ahead of it, and we just completed another update, is what they call a source water capacity plan. And that takes and looks at a snapshot in time. We just did this recently, our growth, our expansion versus our water use. And that's where the number that you referred to, Joe, in the question, that shows us that we're heading toward the point where we need to add supply. And we're well aware of this, and this has incrementally happened over the last few decades. I'm going to guess about 7 years ago, we added a couple big wells in the meadow, boosted our capacity there because we have more. Back then, anyways, we had a lot more growth in the meadow. We probably still do, but we have really two sides to our water system. We have the mountain and the meadow. And by meadow, I'm kind of generously qualifying everything down below here, but there's a lot of irrigation down here. There's not so much on the mountain. Irrigation is the wild card in water use. Our irrigation, our summer use, when there's probably less tourists here, arguably, than in the peak of the summer season, our water use is 300 to 600% more in the summertime than the wintertime. So it's irrigation. But that's what we have to plan for. We can't plan for average. We have to plan for worst case scenario. It's not acceptable to run out of water just a couple of weeks a year. We've got to keep it going all the time. So what we do is we updated our source water capacity plan. There will be a need to add supply if we want to continue to grow at this pace. But bottom line, I think, we're not going to run out of water, but what may happen ultimately someday, and certainly I don't think by 2038, is Big Sky is going to have a conversation with itself is how big do we grow here? How big can we grow? Every restaurant, every theater, and every water system has a seating capacity. And we've got to, constantly try to figure out where that is and build to it. And there's so many, as you know, other factors involved in the growth area here. But water can only take us so far. Most of the press, and I've said this for years working for the Big Sky Water and Sewer, most of the press has been on the wastewater and the discharge of it and all the political ramifications, environmental and all that. And they're all very important subjects. But the true limiting factor is probably going to be Mother Nature and how much water is here. And James done a great job of kind of an overview of just how complicated it is. And one thing I think we could probably all agree on is there is a limit to it. There definitely is a limit to it. So we're keeping the things rolling along here with what we have and adding supply. That kind of rolls into the two things, like I say, that will drive that. One we can control, one we can't. The one we can't control is what I've mentioned, Mother Nature and how much water is there. What we can control is how we conserve what we have and how we deal with that. And we could have a lot of control over that. One tool in that toolbox maybe in the future, getting back to your question, Joe, is the new water resource facility, basically the new treatment plant, will bring us the technology to treat our wastewater to the point we can actually re-inject it, direct potable reuse, re-inject it back in the groundwater and recycle it. So that, in essence, will buy us more growth, buy us more time, however you want to look at it. That's how that question relates to it. there's the whole issue of water rights and all that, but for this conversation, that's not really important. We have plenty of water rights, but that doesn't mean there's plenty of water. So there's a finite amount of water, and the Big Sky Water and Sewer District, as YC works on it hard, Spanish speaks, all the water systems do is try to make what we have go as far as we can. And that's what we're doing. And there's probably going to be some social adjustment going on, just the way there is right now in living color in Las Vegas and Los Angeles. Look at Lake Mead, look at Lake Powell. You've all heard about it. That's what we're getting a glimpse into the future, So it's not a crisis, and it's not going to sneak up on us. It's going to be a conversation we have over and over again. And the good news is there's regulatory tools in place to keep a town from outgrowing its own water resource, short of some catastrophic event that nobody saw coming. All developments have to go through DEQ review. Is there enough water? Is there enough sewer? All those things are in place, and those will continue to be in place. So it's going to happen, whether it's in our lifetime or not, that eventually we run out. Maybe it's going to be sooner as opposed to later. I can't really tell you that, but James did a great job of showing how the aquifers we draw off, in theory, they do replenish every year. Will that continue? At what rate? We don't know. But there is some low-hanging fruit in conservation that we could all get in on. And I've been preaching this for almost 30 years. And when I first came to Big Sky a long time ago, the BSOA, and they did this for a long time, hopefully they're still not doing it, actually required people to put in a minimum amount of sod, grass, and lawn. And that just showed at the time the lack of understanding that the amount of water we have here was finite. They've come around, and everybody's come around. And I think if you ever been to Phoenix, Arizona, you're going to get a glimpse of what's going to happen in the future. People have rock lawns and all these no maintenance things, and it's a natural reaction. And if we want to continue to grow, I think what's important for a lot of the residents that maybe don't study on this, I'm pretty confident I can say if you already live here and you have a house, your tap is always going to have water in it. It's really not about losing the water we already have. It's how much more can we grow? And that's really the question we're faced with. And some people, that might be a good thing that we can't grow anymore. There's some people that want to. So depending on what your perspective on it, but this water sewer district and all the other water sewer districts in the area are aware of this and keeping an eye on it. And in conjunction with state regulatory agencies, we're trying to not outgrow our supply. It's that simple.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. That's great. And I appreciate you touching on the recycle component of the potential for the water resource facility, especially, in the face of, what James mentioned in his overview of snowmelt being, the main water source in Big Sky. I think in the face of climate change, we're going to have to be asking ourselves these difficult questions. So thank you for that. I'd like to jump over to you, Mace, Mangold, and Scott Altman. I think we'll start with Mace here, but if you could give us a brief rundown of what Gallatin Canyon Water and Sewer District is, and oh boy, what's going on? What it is, and what the future holds for the district.
Yeah, I think I've got it to where everybody can see my screen, which is the Canyon District website. Does that show up all right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So the Canyon Sewer District was formed at the end of 2020. So as a result of a one-year study facilitated by the Gallatin River Task Force, funded by BizRad, it really looked at the feasibility of central sewer collection tied to the fact that the entire canyon area that you can see kind of scrolling in this picture is well and septic based. So each one of these homes has either their own septic or there's community septics, and those septics ultimately discharge into the aquifer that we've been talking about as one of our primary water supplies. So I don't want to get long-winded, but in essence, the Canyon District functions as a mechanism to provide that central infrastructure, tap public funds that improve the affordability of constructing this infrastructure, because it isn't cheap. It takes a good amount of money to collect 3 to 5 miles of septic systems, and the current plan of attack is to convey that collected sewer up to Big Sky's new treatment plant, treat it to really high quality effluent, and then come back down and use it as aquifer recharge. So again, I encourage you to visit the Canyon's website. It has a full overview of the project, the benefits, the funding received to date, and the timeline. So I'll keep it brief and point you to the website for more information.
Yeah, thanks, Mace. And just a quick follow-up on that. Will that potentially handle all of the septic systems in the canyon?
So our latest study and effort was really trying to prioritize on a per dollar basis, what should be our focus areas, where are the bulk of the septic systems, and where do those septic systems pose the most risk to the river and to down gradient private wells, drinking water sources. So the goal is to get as many septics as we can and protect the aquifer and the river to the maximum extent affordable. The odds of collecting the entire canyon area is pretty low. Once you get into that lower density off the valley bottom, it's just not cost effective. And frankly, the risk of contamination and impact to the river starts to go down as you get further from the river. So it's kind of a cost benefit aspect to that question.
Got it. Thank you, Mace. Scott Altman, welcome. Nice to see you. Scott, you are, yeah, thanks. You're board chair for the Gallatin Canyon Water and Sewer District. I'm going to follow up with that question to Mace with you here. Does the canyon intend to supply water in addition to treatment of effluent?
So I think our goal, first of all, it's been an amazing collaboration between the task force, the BizRad, Big Sky Water and Sewer. Everyone's kind of really been on board. I mean, if we look at what we've done in a short period of time, it's super encouraging. And our partnership with Mace and his company has been amazing. They have gone out and gotten us grants and such, just at a great rate. It's been super exciting. But our pretty much our goal is like Mace said, we want to take as many people offline as possible, as far as old septic tanks, anything that can be a danger to the river, pretty much everything that we can afford to service. We want to take whatever's going in there now, and if we get rid of the bad and we replace it with stuff that's much more highly treated. So in order to do that, kind of with what Mace was saying, we went through a whole study to find out what's the most critical. Well, getting those, everyone knows tanks off the line is critical, but also that the people have on that side following the natural gradient towards the river are a human health risk as well. So if nothing else, we feel like we can, with some annexations, we feel like we can get some water. There's still a lot of studies to prove that, but we feel like we can get some water. And our initial goal would be to take offline all those wells on the river side of 191. So the answer to your question, yes, we feel like we can get water. We feel like it's critical to get at least enough water to take those guys off and put those guys on water and help the health risk over there. And if we get more, that's great. We'll try and keep making progress with those things. But right now, I think the goal is find out how much water we can get, and then see the highest money to reward ratio we can do with that water to help the canyon the most, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Well, thanks, Scott. That's great. And it's such a massive project that this collaborative group is undertaking. So I just, I think everyone really appreciates the efforts. Kristin,
thank
Gardner.
you very much. It's been great. Thank you, Kristin.
Yeah. Kristin, thanks for your patience. Nice to see you as well. Let me jump over to you. How is Gallatin River Task Force working with both water and sewer districts in Big Sky on water supply, on the work that they're doing?
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Resort Tax and Big Sky Chamber for hosting this panel. So we've had a long-standing history of working with the Big Sky Water and Sewer District that really started with our water conservation program. That was born out of a 2015 effort that we worked on that was essentially a pilot program to assess building drought resilience at the watershed scale. And we hosted a bunch of drought resilience workshops, and Water and Sewer District was part of that. And from that, we started the second water conservation program in the state of Montana that was modeled after Bozeman's program that focused on education and outreach and providing financial incentives. The Water and Sewer District helped fund this program as well as share data. And they've also helped get the word out to their constituents through mailings and through their website on the various financial incentives that we promote through this program. In 2018, we also worked with the Water and Sewer District to update an ordinance that added landscaping recommendations. And then more recently, the Water and Sewer District has provided data that informed our updated water conservation and drought management plan. And we've just completed that this fall. And so we're really excited to implement this plan and strengthen our partnership with the Water and Sewer District and the other water providers in Big Sky. You know, because one of the big outcomes of this source water capacity plan that Jim mentioned is a priority on water conservation. And it is important to note, Jim also mentioned this, that the Water and Sewer District only serves about 60% of our community. So the rest of our community is serviced by other public providers as well as individual wells. So one of our key focus areas coming out of this new planning effort is to figure out a partnership model where we can all work together to make sure that the entire community is working on proactively on water conservation efforts. Water is a shared public resource, and how it's managed by one entity or landowner will impact and ultimately, it'll ultimately impact the water that is shows up in the river and our streams. Mm-hmm. And then finally, we've also collaborated with the Water and Sewer District on the proposals that led to the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology studies, the one that James mentioned in Big Sky, and then also the one that that he's working on currently in Gallatin Canyon. And then as far as the Gallatin Canyon Water and Sewer District, we haven't worked with them specifically on water supply issues yet, but look forward to in the future as they try to figure out what that looks like.
Got it. Thank you, Kristin. Appreciate that. And yeah, I know you guys have got a lot of initiatives going on, and you know, congrats on those efforts. Rich, Chandler, welcome to you. Let me jump over to you quickly. What is the status of the Yellowstone Club's snowmaking initiative currently?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks, David, and everyone for having us here. I think the panelists started hitting a little bit of a chord here, which is, you know, how can we start looking at recycling opportunities with the water, especially with the water that's been, you know, put through the treatment plants. And I think the YC project is a good illustration of that. This started back in 2011 with a seed that was planted within the community of how to create more storage in our aquifer and create more opportunity. And snowmaking was one of the options that really jumped out at all of us. Moving from 2011 to 18, we initiated the permitting process, and it was, you know, a 3-year process. We do have all the permits in place. We began that construction effort here last July, and we have on track to put in about 70% of the infrastructure here between that July timeframe and November 1, when we're going to shut the project down. We're really looking forward to starting the system up here this fall, but unfortunately some constraints, specifically with some electrical distribution equipment, has really prevented us from getting the entire system up and running. So it's looking as though it's going to be a 2023 startup for us. We do have all the deep utilities in the ground, you know, all the main conduits for water and such, but you know, unfortunately we're unable to turn the system on until fall of next year.
Got it. You know, I was just going to follow up with that. You know, will this project have any impact on water supply? I mean, could it, potentially help recharge the aquifer, for example?
Well, I think most certainly that's one of the biggest drivers to the community's involvement with this project. You know, the first phase of the YC project is to put 25 million gallons of water out in the form of snow up on the ski hill. And the return of that generally is modeled somewhere between 70 and 80%. You know, a lot of that is lost in the atmosphere. So if you're looking at 17 to 20 million gallons recharged to the aquifer, it's a significant amount, especially for it just being the first phase of the project. You know, there's concepts on the table for YC to develop more, and maybe some of the other neighboring ski areas as well. You know, not putting that water solely out for irrigation where the plants totally take it up, but maybe reinventing this a little bit, taking the snow and storing it so it is a recharge instead of just an agronomic uptake. Isn't just an immediate result for snowmaking and not pulling the water out of the aquifer, but it also allows that storage component to provide more long stream infusion of water throughout the season.
Got it. Thanks, Rich. Yeah, it's a massive project, and we'll look forward to seeing how that rolls out, next year.
I think the team put down 37,000 linear feet of pipe this summer.
Wow.
Which is remarkable for such a short period of time.
It certainly is. Yeah. Nice work. Well, I've got one more quick question before we jump to some audience questions. Kristin, I want to head back to you here. There's been a lot of talk about algae blooms in the Gallatin, obviously nitrogen, and James Rose talked about nitrate levels, but nitrogen and phosphorus are nutrients that have been linked to increased algae blooms in the Gallatin. What are some of the factors causing higher amounts of these nutrients? I think you're on mute there.
Yeah, thank you. We haven't actually recorded higher levels of the nutrients in the stream.
Mm-hmm.
But we have seen changing environmental conditions like warming water temperatures and more sunlight. We have conducted these experiments in the river that do show that if we do add more nitrogen to the stream, that we will see more algae. So really, we're really focused on reducing the amount of nitrogen, that makes it to the stream. And so sources of nitrogen include, wastewater, both from centralized treatment and septic systems, also fertilizer, stormwater. But, with the new treatment plant, that will definitely help reduce the amount of nitrogen that makes it to the river. But there's still those septic systems, not only in Gallatin Canyon, but also in the meadow, that we need to hook up to centralized treatment if we really want to do the most that we can to lessen those future algae blooms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just mentioned the water resource recovery facility. Will that higher level of treatment rid us of algae blooms in the Gallatin, and would it have any impact on water supply?
I don't think it'll rid us of future algae blooms. Like I said, I think we have to address the septic systems to really do the job. But as far as water supply, it will greatly benefit water supply if we choose water reuse or wastewater reuse options that benefit water supply. And also if we strategically release that water in areas that will replenish that where the water is being withdrawn. So for example, if we're withdrawing water from Meadow Village, we need to focus on reuse that is benefiting the Meadow Village area essentially. So yeah, that improvement in the plant will allow us to do those options that benefit water supply, like groundwater recharge and like the snowmaking project at the Yellowstone Club that Rich mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this all goes. I mean, this will be a discussion for a very long time, but I think this has been incredibly helpful for everyone to help get a better understanding from a lot of your knowledgeable perspectives. Jenny, I wanted to go over to you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
We have a few.
Mm-hmm.
We'll start with one for James Rose. What years was the data and analysis that he presented regarding the water wells, et cetera, collected? This person thought they saw 2016, but just wants to clarify.
Right, yeah, the data were collected 2013, 14, 15, and a little bit in 16, but essentially that time period. And the report took a little bit longer to write because it was an extensive area, but that's the period the data were collected. And one thing about it, if there's concern about it being, the situation being different now, would be we have all that baseline data now for a lot of these wells and a lot of the groundwater systems and streams in the area. And we could always go back and revisit some of these areas and see if anything's changed based on, you know, but from that 3-year period that we saw, things were pretty consistent year to year within a little bit of variation for different precipitation amounts and that sort of thing.
May I just add one thing? That the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology is continuing to monitor some of those wells, as well as the Water and Sewer District. And one of the outcomes of the source water capacity plan that Jim mentioned is recommending that they put more data loggers into more wells in the Meadow Village.
Nice.
This question's for Jim. You spoke on irrigation as a big influence in usage. Other than updated landscape plans with minimal irrigation, what are other best practices that you would recommend to keep residential water usage low? I know that the Water and Sewer District has been working hard to alert customers about leaks in running appliances.
Oh, got it. Okay. Well, this was a big part, as I mentioned, in our source capacity plan. And our engineer actually kind of recommended what was dubbed some draconian measures. And that was basically limiting all new landscape to 500 square feet. And if you think about that, that's not a very big lawn, but that would put some teeth into it. That would have an effect on it. Every little bit helps, but at this point in the equation, we're looking at what I call the low-hanging fruit, the big gains. Obviously, it's a mind change, it's a mindset, it's a demographic change from when we all grew up and sprinklers and lawns and big lawns and all that. So it will be a gradual change, but the biggest thing we can do is changing landscape to xeriscape. That is 2/3 to 3/4 of it right there. Because when you look at the flow data from Big Sky itself, and you compare it on a nationwide basis, and this is kind of what I use as a barometer, is the DEQ kind of figures 300 gallons per day per household, and that's domestic use. Well, Big Sky is quite a bit less of that in the wintertime when you take the landscape out of the equation. So as a community, we're pretty conservative in water, and part of that is on the demographics of resorts. People are coming here. It's versus, I'll use the term a working town where it's a bedroom community. Belgrade would be a good example. People go to work and they come home. There's not that much VRBO going on and that type of stuff. So our population structure is kind of such that people aren't staying home very much. They're coming here and using the resources around. So on a per gallon per day per person, we're actually quite good, but we just really go off the map with the irrigation. So that's where we are and where we really need to put focus. And we will just need to put more and more teeth into that. We have tools. Ron Edwards will remind me all the time that, we do control the water rates, and that is the obvious big hammer. You can make it so expensive, but on the other hand, there's that's not as effective a tool in a town like this as maybe some other towns. But irrigation and water conservation is the bulk of the conversation.
Thanks, Jim. Jenny, I think we probably have time for one more question if you've got one.
Okay, perfect. Bill Reed, you have your hand raised. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, we should be able to hear you. Bill, you need to unmute yourself. Okay, we're going to move on to Tally. Tally, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh, Tally, we got you.
How about now?
Hey, there
There
you
you
are.
are.
Okay, terrific. Hey, I guess this is a question for Jim. As you talk about conservation, I wonder if another low-hanging fruit isn't addressing the law that requires hot tubs to be completely emptied after every renter stays in a unit. That seems to be, to my mind, a low-hanging fruit, but maybe it's not.
I couldn't agree more. You know, I was surprised to see here. We've got a new employee on the sewer side here, Adam Roots, and he was in that business. And that's what I just, you know, about a year ago came to realize how much these hot tubs turn over. It's a big factor. Now, the district can only do so much of that because you have to realize these people are paying for the water. It's going through the meter. We can only, you know, we can only interfere to some extent. That is certainly a lot of water, but on a scale, when you take that 200 to 300 gallons of water, even per day, let's just say they did it 365 days a year, which they don't, it's a drop in the bucket still compared to the irrigation. When you start doing the math on irrigation, and the amount of gallons per day that puts out, usually morning and evening, it's still not of the same scale, but every little bit helps, and hot tubs aren't a little bit, but I'm not sure what the answer is there, especially on the post-COVID and the awareness and all that kind of thing. That's why they're doing it. So we're aware of it. We don't you know, have any plans immediately start controlling or stopping that, but it all goes to the demographics and the attitude. We all have to kind of reevaluate how much we use if we want to continue this lifestyle here.
Thanks, Tally. Great question. Jim, great answer as well. I mean, I think what this goes to show is that, you know, the communication, the conversation is ongoing, but that we're talking about it at all is a major component. Yeah, what an educational discussion. You know, thank all of you for who are watching, and a big thanks to all our panelists. I'm Joe O'Connor, managing editor with Mountain Journal. And this conversation on our local water supply has been part of the Big Sky Community Week, hosted by Big Sky Resort Area District and the Big Sky Chamber of Commerce. Check this week's event schedule and watch the full recording of this conversation, which will be available tomorrow morning at bigskycommunityweek.com. Lastly, you know, join us at 2 p.m. today. I'll be hosting another panel discussion on emergency management in Big Sky. And again, thanks everyone for your time. Great conversation, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.